Hello everyone, my name is Arlene Eel. I am the Manager of Planning and Policy for the Persons with Developmental Disabilities program within the Ministry of Human Services. I would like to welcome you to today's webcast titled the Abuse Prevention and Response Protocol Training. Before we get to the webcast presentation, I wanted to mention that these webcasts are part of a larger joint initiative by the Government of Alberta called the Human Services Learning Series. For more information about this series, please check your emails for regular updates or go to the hslearning.ca. You can follow on Twitter at the username at abhumanservices. Today's session is also being recorded, and the video will be posted on the HS Learning Series webpage after the live recording. First, let me introduce our speakers. Barb Holmberg is a contract specialist with Disability Services North Central Region. She has been involved in the abuse prevention and response protocol training and implementation for over 14 years and has trained many regional and agency staff. Gail Jennings is a contract specialist with Disability Services Edmonton Region. She has been with the Government of Alberta for over 34 years, with 30 years in disability services. She's helped develop the abuse prevention and response protocol and has trained regional and agency staff during that time. So let's get started, and once again, welcome to today's webcast.
Thanks, Arlene. Welcome to our Abuse Prevention and Response Protocol webcast. Thank you for attending and your interest in safeguards for individuals with disabilities. Today, what we're providing for you is a high-level overview of principles and content of the protocol. You will begin to notice that there have not been sweeping changes in the document. And the reason for this is that the protocol document was already built on a solid foundation of principles rooted in best practice and research. For example, the element of community inclusion and the link to prevention. We will be highlighting the changes that have been made as we go, which have resulted in a more streamlined and up-to-date document to guide us in this journey. If at the end of today you have more specific questions, we also have an opportunity for you to connect on a website that will provide you with information about additional training opportunities as we go. So let's get started. Our learning objectives for today are to understand the purpose of abuse prevention and response protocol, to develop an awareness of the types of abuse as defined under the abuse prevention and response protocol, to develop a general understanding of the APRP reporting, review, and follow-up processes, including roles and responsibilities, and to be aware of additional legislative requirements related to responding to allegations of abuse. So for today, we're going to be using a number of acronyms, and we wanted to share with you a list of the acronyms we're going to be using to enhance your understanding about what we're referencing when we use them as we're moving through the presentation so that you know what we're referring to. APRP stands for Abuse Prevention and Response Protocol, and Gail and I often just refer to it as the protocol. CRC stands for Criminal Record Check. PDD is Persons with Developmental Disabilities Program. PPC, Protection for Persons in Care. And when we talk about PDD stakeholders, we're referring to families, service provider agencies and their staff, Family Managed Services, or FMS, administrators and their staff. I will now turn it over to Gail to begin to talk about some of the changes.
Thanks, Barb. Good morning. The overview of the revisions to the protocol is that there's now better streamlining of the prevention strategies as well as the reporting processes. There's better clarification of PDD's role in the review and follow-up processes. There are enhancements to the service providers and FMS role in preventing abuse, and there is legislative and language updates. The purpose and objectives of the protocol include confirming that adherence to the protocol is mandatory. It stresses the requirement to ensure for the ongoing safety of all individuals. It provides accountability through a provincial approach to abuse responses. It ensures that all stakeholders are aware of their responsibility in both preventing abuse as well as responding appropriately when incidences of abuse occur. It promotes a collaborative, community-based approach to addressing all aspects of abuse, and it ensures that clear accountability measures are in place. The responsibilities of the key stakeholders. It remains an important preventative measure to ensure that criminal record checks and/or vulnerable sector checks are completed for all employees and contractors who work with individuals. It is important to ensure always that individuals are safe and protected from abuse, and that all necessary actions are taken to ensure for the continued safety, well-being, and security of all individuals when an allegation has been reported. While it is important to take immediate actions when an abuse occurs, it is also equally important to take preventative measures. Actions such as examining and enhancing current practices may be deemed as necessary, or even developing new proactive measures. One of the many preventative measures would also be is to ensure that all staff and contract workers are trained in the protocol. Many service providers also offer the training to volunteers, and this is an excellent preventative strategy. Another important strategy would be to work with the individuals and their guardians to ensure that the individuals are aware of their rights, and both the guardians and the families and guardians know who and where to report any concerns or questions that they may have. How is abuse defined? Under the Abuse Prevention and Response Protocol, abuse occurs when a staff person, contractor, or agent misuses their authority by acting in a way that could cause harm to an individual receiving PDD-funded supports. Individuals with developmental disabilities have an increased risk of being taken advantage of or abused by others. Abuse occurs when a person acts in a way that could cause harm to another person. Abuse potentially comes from many sources, such as a staff member, member of the public, family member, another individual, and multiple other sources. Under the protocol, there are 6 categories of abuse: physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, negligence, exploitation, and inappropriate use of restrictive procedures. I'll now pass it over to Barb.
So now that we understand what is considered abuse, let's shift our focus to the prevention of abuse. The principles for determining individual support needs form the foundation of prevention and effective support for the individual. The foundation principle is that individuals, with the assistance of their families and friends, are the primary source for identifying what is best for themselves and what kinds of support they require. The supplementary principle recognizes that many adults with developmental disabilities require the assistance of paid supports to live, work, and participate in the community. Supplementary principles have been identified to guide the supports that are actually funded by PDD. One of the supplementary principles by which agencies across the province define themselves is that of inclusion and the meaningful lives that they support people to lead. This is the important work that's already being supported by agencies and their hardworking staff. Some other principles are that supports are adequate, flexible, individualized, while being responsive to personal and family changes, as well as community dynamics. Community dynamics can take into consideration any number of social and economic issues. One example that may have an impact is a high unemployment rate or on the converse, a community with ample opportunities for work. Certainly could change the support needs for individuals. Supports assist individuals to maintain and build their connections and relationships with family, friends, and other community members, and should not define all aspects of a person's life. Supports recognize the potential of individuals and provide them with opportunities for continuing growth, personal development, and lifelong learning. Supports respond to the direction determined by individuals, their families, and guardians, being careful to follow their lead rather than take control. We've seen the amazing results of this work across all communities in Alberta and should take a moment to celebrate these achievements. Every day we hear stories of people who achieve their dreams or move a step closer to the realization of those dreams. The creativity that emerges from the ways in which agencies strive to understand the individuals and what's important to them is also an important element of creating a plan that is tailor-built to individuals. Some create storyboards or photo versions or even videos of what individuals want to achieve with the assistance of supports. Prevention is a critical element in addressing the issue of abuse. PDD regional staff are required to review all areas of vulnerability and how to reduce risk when working with an individual and/or agency. PDD key stakeholders should exercise prevention measures outlined in this protocol in their policies and guiding legislation such as PPC. And remember, everyone has a role in the prevention of abuse. Other stakeholders should also promote prevention measures, for example, inclusion, starting with participation in the community. We should promote a sense of belonging and acceptance. Prevention of abuse is more likely to be a reality for all of us when we have a sense of belonging and feel accepted as valued members of our communities. We should reduce isolation and increase natural supports. For vulnerable populations within our agency, the focus is typically on deficits and needs, which does not lead to natural connections in the community and serves to isolate people. We should see the gifts, capabilities, and contributions of vulnerable populations. The risk of abuse is lessened when the community sees the gifts, capabilities, and contributions of vulnerable populations, including individuals with developmental disabilities. I'll be sharing a couple of examples later on in the presentation of how this actually bears out in communities. We should tap into community capacity. PDD believes that communities have the capacity to accept and include vulnerable individuals when the focus is on their gifts, capacities, and contributions. We have identified the importance of developing strategies for tapping into community capacity as a critical part of promoting inclusion. And last but certainly not least, employers should pay attention to staff needs to avoid caregiver burnout and stress, which may lead to frustration and affect their behavior. Service provider agencies and FMS administrators should pay attention to their support staff's well-being. Abuse by support staff sometimes happens when they're going through some challenges in their own lives that agencies do not pay attention to. Supporting your staff is very important in preventing abuse. Understanding why adults with developmental disabilities are at risk of being abused is the topic of the next slide, because we need to understand vulnerabilities in order to improve our focus on prevention. There are 4 overarching themes consistent with vulnerabilities for persons with disabilities. The first is authority and power imbalances. When abuse occurs, there's always a power imbalance present. This power imbalance is evident in the lives of individuals who receive supports in the sense that they are the receivers and other people are the givers. There needs to be a change from a protective role to that of an empowerment one. An example of this is, instead of confronting someone who is antagonistic on behalf of someone with a disability, work towards empowering that individual with tools and knowledge to respond themselves. Negative attitudes. Abuse occurs when people act on these negative feelings and treat individuals as if they're not valued members of society. When individuals with developmental disabilities are recognized as valued members of society and have a network of support, the probability of mistreatment is reduced. I'm sure you can all think of examples of this from your own experience. People who are valued and would probably never be exposed to potential abuse. Historically, individuals with disabilities have had less experience with making choices, so they've learned to be compliant. Sometimes they're not provided with opportunities to make choices and are expected to defer to the opinions of others who think they know best. This becomes learned compliance, which makes individuals even more vulnerable. This is further complicated by the tendency of people with disabilities to want to please, especially when interacting with people in positions of authority. And the fourth is isolation and protection. Sometimes individuals with disabilities are isolated from the community and paid staff are their only source of social support. As a result, individuals may have no source of outside assistance, support, or advocacy to protect them from abuse and or support them if they are ever victimized. Who do they tell? It is crucial in the protection of individuals to provide opportunities that will expand their support networks and circles of support and promote community. So now that we understand vulnerabilities, how do we reduce them? The first is to see people from a positive perspective, having capacities and gifts, not deficits and needs. And I have two examples of this to share with you. The first one is one in which an individual has an amazing talent for art, for example, but has difficulty in social situations. If we were to view this person only from a deficit and needs perspective, we would focus only on the need for social skills. But to celebrate them as a great artist takes us to a place where we're focusing on gifts and abilities and gives us a starting point to build a social network, perhaps as others also see the value in their work and contributions. It may also provide them with a community of interest. Another example from my own social circle is someone I know who appears to be grumpy and sullen and dislikes social situations, but is an excellent organizer and builder and loves to fish and talk about fishing. If he is organizing fishing or with a group of like-minded people, he is quite cheerful and outgoing. Now what we do is we focus on how to include him in the organization of activities and events to quite a different outcome. He is engaged and quite pleasant to work with, and the job always gets done. After all, he is an organizer. The key for each of us is to seek out our talents and find ways to include everyone in ways that engage the very best of us. To discover our gifts and what we bring to the table. Many of you know how to do that in very creative and remarkable ways. We also need to strive for a quality of life which is defined by the person based on their interests, dreams, and desires. I think this is really what everyone wants in life. We need to have people be involved in the community where people can get to know the person. And I also have an example of this. Involvement in the community is very important. And let me share an example. This made a difference for one individual. He was someone who had a community job in reception in a high traffic office. Lots of people would come in and out of the building, and many got to know him. One day he was at a bank machine and about to be relieved of the cash he withdrew by a group of young men. A community member saw what was happening, and the community member stepped in and intervened because he knew him. The more people who know you, the more people will look out for you. It's like when you go on vacation. If all the neighbors are watching your home, you feel much more secure. Assisting individuals with disabilities to understand their right to be treated with dignity and respect and how to recognize abuse and know what action to take is also very key in reducing vulnerabilities. Education is crucial in helping people to understand their vulnerabilities. I know there are service providers who deliver training in rights and how to respond if you think someone is taking advantage of you. This is very, very key work. So of course we have expectations of key stakeholders. And again, our key stakeholders are service provider organizations, FMS administrators, direct operations staff, and staff hired to provide supports, and PDD staff. So let's first talk about PDD program and regional staff. We should ensure that training materials are available for staff use, serve as a resource in the area of education on abuse prevention. It is our responsibility to keep current on the literature and promising practices in the area of abuse prevention. We are to encourage service provider organizations, FMS administrators, and direct operations staff to discuss abuse prevention, share learnings, and identify challenges. We are to ensure that service provider organizations, FMS administrators, and direct operations staff understand the expectation to educate their staff and encourage dialogue in the area of abuse prevention. We also need to ensure service provider organizations have a mechanism in place to provide individuals and families with information and orientation regarding the issues of abuse prevention and response. We also have a responsibility to hold service provider organizations, FMS administrators, direct operations staff accountable for using PDD funds towards the promotion of inclusion for the individual or individuals being supported. Stakeholders should have a clear understanding of the prevention component of the protocol, conduct criminal record checks on all potential employees and contractors, have a mechanism in place to ensure that individuals and families receive information and orientation regarding the issues of abuse prevention and abuse, act as a resource to the community at large. This is a wonderful opportunity. We are all educators and spokespersons about the abilities and capacities of persons with disabilities. Each day there are opportunities to educate the community. Seize those opportunities to talk about the gifts and contributions of the individual you support in the situation that you find yourself in. Ensure that individuals being supported are aware of their rights and the outcome of supports that are intended to assist them to achieve a quality life in the community. Assist the individual in understanding what abuse is and what their rights are. To support staff in reducing stress levels by creating a healthy work environment. By no means is this an exhaustive list, but clear expectations, good direction, support in brainstorming and problem solving are just but a few examples of how to do that. Ensure that all staff are trained on abuse prevention and response protocol. It is actually a requirement. Provide opportunities for staff members to discuss prevention, share learnings, and identify challenges. Some employers make this activity part of their regular staff meetings, so they give people an opportunity to talk about abuse and about inclusion and about prevention. So I challenge you to do that as well, because from what I hear, it sounds like it's a great opportunity for staff to come together and share ideas. Monitor how well staff practices promote the strengthening of natural connections within the community. Ensure staff are trained and have skills and capacities to complete the job. There's no worse feeling than to be in a job and not know what to do or how to respond to a situation. So guide your staff as required. Be aware that burnout, frustration, and stress of your employees can lead to abusive behaviors. And pay attention to your staff needs, workload, caregiver challenges, and personal issues that may affect their behaviors. Before we leave the prevention piece of this presentation, I'd like to extend an invitation to each of you. In whatever role you possess, ask yourself, what more can I do towards the prevention of abuse? Brainstorm on your own or with your teams and identify all of the strategies that you and your role can employ. I invite you to share your strategies with us. We love to hear about the creative and innovative work that's being done at every level. I also want to leave you with an important thought, that there is no act too small in the prevention of abuse. Everything counts, even if you think it may not be enough. It's a step, it's important, and it could make a huge difference. I will now turn the presentation back to Gail.
Thanks, Barb. First, I just wanted to let everyone know that our live chat function isn't working, but we're trying really hard to get it up and running. Despite all best efforts to prevent abuse, there is still sometimes when incidents of abuse will occur. A reminder that the definition of abuse, I think I'm behind slides, sorry about that. There we go. The definition of abuse from the abuse protocol is, abuse occurs when a staff person, contractor, or agent misuses their authority by acting in a way that causes harm or could cause harm to an individual receiving PDD-funded supports. All allegations of abuse must be reported with no exceptions. Allegations of abuse are not only reported by the individual, service provider staff, and FMS administrator, but reports of abuse could potentially come from other sources, such as a member of the public, family member, another individual, medical professional, as well as many others. There may be situations when the allegation falls only under the abuse protocol, or the abuse protocol and other legislations, or just another legislation. Such legislations include the Criminal Code, Protection for Persons in Care Act, and the Adult Guardianship and Trustee Act. When these situations occur, it is important to follow through with reporting to the correct authority. More details regarding how to contact these different legislative authorities will be discussed later in the presentation. Here are some of the main guidelines to remember when reporting abuse allegations. Ensure that all individuals, including the alleged victim, is safe. If an individual is at risk, take immediate action. Call the police if you believe the allegation is criminal in nature by calling 911. Report all incidents of abuse to PDD. Send a preliminary report to PDD within 1 working day for all abuse allegations that fall under the Abuse Prevention and Response Protocol. A reminder that all PDD stakeholders must always follow through reporting offenses to the different authorities, such as the Criminal Code, Protection for Persons in Care Act, and the Adult and Guardianship Trustee Act. When Albertans believe abuse has occurred, they should call the reporting line at 1-888-357-9339. This number is a phone tree, so by pressing 1, it will direct you to Protection for Persons in Care. Pressing 2 brings you to the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee. 3, Accommodation Standards and Licensing, and pressing 4 puts you into contact with someone who can assist you. Confidentiality and privacy. Each individual's right to privacy and confidentiality must be respected. In some situations, it may be necessary to share an individual's personal information with third parties, such as the police, the Office of the Public Guardian, or the Protections of Persons in Care, and other legislative authorities. And this is appropriate, as the disclosure is only done with the individual's best interest in mind and for the purpose of reporting the suspected abuse to the correct authority. These situations are permitted under the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act, otherwise known as FOIP. After a preliminary report has been made for allegations that fall under the protocol, a review will be conducted. Most reviews are considered to be internal reviews, and that means the reviews are conducted by either the service provider agency, PDD region, direct operations, or the FMS administrator in conjunction with PDD. Under certain circumstances, an external review may be initiated and conducted by PDD with the cooperation of the service provider and the FMS administrator. Some of the key components to conducting a review include developing a review plan, obtaining guardian consent to interview the individual, and ideally asking the individual if they wish to contact any supporters or co-decision makers prior to the interview. Speak with the people who witnessed the incident and other people who have relevant direct information about the allegation. Gather other relevant information and documentation such as records. Keep a written record of all of the information gathered during the review. If any of the allegations are ever considered to be potentially criminal in nature, contact the police immediately. The final or interim report under the protocol must be submitted to PDD within 30 days. Some key components of this report include the category of the abuse allegation, a description of the review process as well as the information gathered, what the findings of the review are, including what the outcome was, such as founded, unfounded, or inconclusive. It should also include the recommendations based on the finding of the review that include a follow-up or action plan to support those impacted by the allegation and indicate what preventative measures are in place to prevent other future similar allegations. For example, the plan may include confirmation that professional counseling support has been offered to the victim. The plan also may include some retraining for staff, including the alleged abuser. PDD regional staff will review the final report and will follow up with the service provider. After the reports are received at PDD, PDD staff will also be following up with the individual and/or guardian. There are circumstances when it's deemed as necessary for PDD staff to conduct a review. Before such a review is conducted, it must be pre-authorized by the regional director, PDD regional director. A review will be conducted if, but not limited to, there are repeated or multiple incidents of abuse that have occurred, the incident is of a highly sensitive nature, or an executive director or board member of a service provider agency or family hiring privately is implicated in the allegation. When following up with other jurisdictions, here are some of the steps that will happen. When following up with a police investigation, PDD regional staff will always follow up with the service provider or the FMS administrator with regard to the outcome of the police investigation. PDD regional staff will also follow up with the individual and/or guardian. When following up from a protection for persons in care investigation, the service provider will receive a copy of the PPC director's decision. The service provider must respond to the director of PPC within a set timeline and show compliance with the decision. PDD regional staff will follow up with the service provider to ensure the direction specified by the PDD director is implemented. After following up from an investigation completed by the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee, PDD regional staff will follow up as needed with that office after the completion of their investigation. I'll now turn it over to Barb.
So that concludes the presentation portion of our webcast. Are we able to take some questions?
Yeah,
No?
so as was mentioned by our speakers earlier on, unfortunately the live chat function has been down for the webcast, so we weren't able to take live questions. We do, however, have some frequently asked questions that we will address instead. So the first one of those questions is, could my employment possibly be in jeopardy if I report an allegation of abuse within the agency where I work?
The protocol makes it clear that no action should be taken against an employee who reports a concern or incident of abuse unless it's proven that the report was made maliciously. And that's actually contained right in the protocol. I believe it's page 12.
The next question is, if there is an allegation of abuse that falls under both the APRP and PPC, do service providers wait until PPC conducts their investigation?
This is a really good question, and one that we hear quite a bit, because I think that service providers are concerned that they might be interfering with a PPC investigation. The answer to that is no. The service provider first needs to ensure that the alleged victim and all other supported individuals are safe, and then proceed with the APRP reporting and review processes. The information gathered in that agency review can be shared with PPC investigator during their investigation. And in fact, we've found that there are times that they find it helpful.
The next question is, what is the recommended approach to training agency and FMS staff?
Okay. It is required that the agency and FMS staff be trained to the protocol. Scheduling of training should be done by the agencies and FMS administrators. Training can be conducted by agency staff trained to do so by a trained FMS administrator. PDD region can also assist in staff training if required or requested.
This next question is a bit of a scenario. So if I'm an FMS administrator for my cousin, if an allegation of abuse is made against my staff, who do I contact and how do I conduct the interview?
So once an allegation of abuse is received, there are certain responsibilities of an FMS administrator. So first is to stop the abuse from happening, which may include taking action as the employer, such as suspending the staff, etc. Ensure the safety and rights of the individual affected. Contact police if the allegation is criminal in nature and cooperate with the police when they're conducting an investigation. Notify your PDD regional office within 1 working day of being notified of the allegation. And then PDD staff will work with you to determine who will take the lead in conducting the review. Options may include you as the FMS administrator taking the lead, PDD assisting with a review, or PDD conducting an external review.
What does meaningful inclusion mean, and how do I promote it as a support staff?
That's a wonderful question. Inclusion is meaningful when it helps in realizing the goals and vision of the individuals. It is meaningful when it promotes individuals' social and psychological well-being and adds to the overall quality of life. Most of you work from an outcomes base, and quality of life is certainly one of the outcomes that we strive to achieve for individuals.
And the next question is, what does natural support mean?
Natural supports are the people involved in an individual's life that are not formal paid staff, people that the individual has a close relationship with, that include family, friends, coworkers, fellow students, and others.
Next question is, will there be train the trainer sessions?
Yes, there will be train the trainer sessions.
And will updated documents be shared, including slide versions for those who are being trained?
Yes, absolutely. I believe that Arlene will be sharing some information, at the end of the webcast in terms of how to access those documents.
Next question is, what should I be mindful of when reporting abuse or conducting a review to ensure that I maintain confidentiality?
Do not share information to any third party other than your supervisor, PDD region, PPC, OPGT, and police. Information shared should be in the interests of the individual being supported.
And where do I find a copy of the protocol?
A copy of the protocol can be accessed online by visiting the PDD website.
What will be an example of abuse that falls under the protocol but outside of PPC?
So, okay, that is also a very good question. Each circumstance is unique. When in doubt, err on the side of caution by contacting both PDD and PPC. It's clear that incidents involving FMS do not fall under PPC, but again, it's probably best to make that phone call and ask those questions to get a direct answer related to the specific circumstances of the situation.
Next question is, what is the role of PDD staff when abuse is reported?
Following receipt of the preliminary report, PDD staff should follow up with the individual to ensure their safety and follow up with the agency to ensure that appropriate initial actions are being taken. At the request of the service provider or FMS administrator, PDD can also assist in carrying out the internal review, or if deemed necessary by the PDD director, PDD staff may lead the completion of an external review, in that when PDD staff are conducting the review, it is considered external.
And this is our last question. What if there is an allegation of abuse against an individual and the agency wants to interview the alleged victim, but the legal guardian refuses to provide consent to do so?
The service provider would be expected to continue to conduct and finalize their abuse prevention review and gather information from all other available sources. Notation should be included in the final report indicating that the legal guardian has refused consent and indicate the reason. Keep in mind that the disability services staff can be contacted at any time during the review to offer guidance and/or support. And I think in a circumstance like that, I would certainly want to be having conversations with the PDD staff. I believe that now concludes the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb and Gail. Thanks again for joining us today. As was previously mentioned, the updated protocol document, as well as the associated PowerPoints and materials for training, will be posted on the PDD program website under the or within the online policy. As mentioned in the opening, today's webcast is part of the Government of Alberta's Human Services Learning Series, which will be running the third week of each month through July 2016. The series covers topics from PDD like the one you saw today, but there's also other series that have been discussed, including the Alberta Brain Injury Initiative, Employment First, Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Initiative, and the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee. Stay tuned for information on our next sessions our next season of webcasts. You can find past and future webcasts and sign up at hslearningseries.ca. Today's webcast was recorded and the video will be posted online along with videos from all the previous webcasts. The video link will be sent out to all registrants in the near future. We encourage you to share this video with anyone you think might be interested in the material. If you have feedback about today's webcast or questions that you did not have opportunity to ask and have addressed, please email us at pddmailbox@gov.ab.ca and let us know your thoughts. You will also be receiving a feedback email from us. Please take the time to let us know what you think of your thoughts on today's webcast. We'd love to hear your ideas. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we hope to see you next time.